Hello and welcome to the Sallie Tomato YouTube channel. I'm Kate, and here at Sallie Tomato we enjoy bringing you tutorials that both teach and inspire. So today's tutorial, I think we're going to be inspired by the beautiful cumulus clouds with their puffy appearance in our cloud bag pattern that we're going to be doing today. We're going to be creating a fullness that gives the bag that cloud-like appearance. And then to add to the dreamy combination, we'll be adding a slip pocket and zipper pocket to the interior. Before we begin the tutorial, be sure to purchase the pattern. You can find the pattern and all the supplies for this project on our website, or you can request them at your local quilt shop. And we always encourage you to shop local whenever you can. The supplies you need are listed on the back of the pattern, including a list of helpful notions. All right, gather your supplies, cut out all your pieces that you're going to need, and remember you can always pause the video as we go along. That way we're sewing at your pace. Are you ready to get started? Let's go. Before beginning, please review the recommended fabrics on the back of the pattern cover. You may find it helpful to label your pieces as you cut them by marking the name of each piece on the wrong side with a removable pen or chalk, or use piece labels that are printed from our free download on our website. There are also cutting layouts included in the pattern. The pattern piece A for the exterior is printed in 2 pieces in your pattern, so be sure to tile or tape them together matching the A markers on the paper pattern. I've cut mirror images of the pattern pieces to create a complete paper pattern. The fold line becomes my center line, and it makes it easy to cut a single layer of fabric. I did the same technique for the pattern pieces C and D. The cloud bag was designed to use our beautiful wooden circle handles, so just be aware if you're using a different circle handle hardware, it may fit in the handle facing a little differently. Our first step is to fuse interfacing to the coordinating pieces, and certainly skip the interfacing if you're using denim or light faux leather. The faux leather is sensitive to heat, and the denim is heavy enough that you should not need to interface the denim or the light faux leather if you're using that as the main fabric. I'm using cotton fabrics for both the lining and the exterior or the main fabric. So I've gone ahead and interfaced both the main exterior fabric and the lining fabric. I like to add interfacing to my lining. It gives it more structure, especially for this bag. I find it helpful, but certainly if you're using a heavier fabric or you don't care to add interfacing to your lining, you can certainly pass that up. And let's move on to shaping the base pieces. You'll place the corner template A that's found in your pattern in each corner of your main fabric, the lining, and foam pieces B, that will be your base pieces. You'll trace the outer edge of the template from edge to edge and then cut along the marked line to round each corner. And you're going to repeat this same step with your heavy stabilizer piece G, but this time use the smaller template, that's the corner template B. Okay, we can prepare our exterior base. You're going to center piece G stabilizer onto the wrong side of your main piece B, that's your base piece, and then using basting spray or basting tape to hold the stabilizer in place, you'll top stitch following the edge of piece G, that's the stabilizer, stitching very close to the cut edge. The stabilizer piece is cut smaller than your piece B, that's your main fabric, so it doesn't get caught in the seam in a later step, and the firmness of the stabilizer will help prevent the base of your bag from sagging. And we'll repeat this same step, adding the foam piece B to our main piece B base, covering the stabilizer. Be sure to follow your pattern for the seam allowances in case I don't mention whether they're wider or narrower. This one is a little wider than our first allowance that we stitched with the stabilizer. You may find it helpful to trim your foam close to the stitching. That's going to reduce the bulk when we start assembly of our bag. It may not be mentioned in all patterns, but sometimes that's a really helpful tip. And then on the wrong side of the base, mark the center at each raw edge. Our next step is optional, and that is installing the bag feet. If you have never installed bag feet before, we give detailed instructions in our pattern, but also take a look at how to install purse feet on our YouTube channel in our bag making technique playlist. All right, let's put the base aside for a minute and prepare the exterior puff. Using a removable pen or chalk, mark the center and then also transfer the two gather marks along the bottom curved edge of your pattern piece A to the curved edge of each main fabric piece A. So you'll mark center, and then on either side you'll mark the end or marking for your gathering stitch. At the sewing machine, we're going to stitch a gathering stitch between the outer marks with a 1/4 inch allowance. To make an easy gathering stitch, I found that adjusting my tension slightly on my machine for the upper thread or needle thread, tightening that just a little bit, helps pull the bobbin thread up and will make gathering just a little easier, but certainly use your favorite technique. I'm leaving long tails at the beginning of my gathering row or gathering stitches, and also a long tail at the end of my stitch line. That way I have thread long enough that I can grab and pull, creating those gathers. Before sewing your side seams, be sure to return your needle tension to the correct tension so that you get properly formed stitches. At the sewing machine, sew the side seams. You're going to repeat the same step to sew the side seams of your foam piece D, that's the interior structure that we're creating, and then you'll turn the foam interior right side out. The seam allowances are going to be to the inside of the tube that you just created. And now with right sides up, you're going to position the main fabric, that's the exterior puff, over your foam interior, aligning the top raw edges and matching the side seams. You'll base the layers together with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, starting and stopping at the side seams. You'll notice that the inner curves along that top edge of the foam and the main fabric don't look exactly alike, but once we begin assembling the bag, you'll see how everything goes together. The smaller opening in the main fabric will open up and kind of stretch to match your foam inner curved edge, so it should work just fine. If you notice your foam isn't quite lined up with the exterior puff or the main fabric, simply nudge the main fabric edge to match the foam curved edge, keeping that nice smooth center curved edge. As you can see, I was able to just shift my main exterior fabric so it matches with the foam. At the side seam, be sure to end your stitching a little ways away from that side seam. You don't want to stitch across the side seam when you're basting these edges together. Now align and pin your main exterior fabric, that's the puff, side seams, to the foam side seams along the bottom edge. You're going to align the bottom raw edges and then baste those layers together. The exterior puff is longer than the foam at the center, and that's going to accentuate the cloud-inspired shape of our bag. You're going to gently pull your gathering threads to fit the bottom edge of your main fabric, the exterior puff, to the bottom edge of the foam. To gather the puff, I'm grasping the top thread that would have been my needle thread, which was at the tighter tension. I want to pull that particular thread because it's going to slide through the bobbin stitches very easily, because the tighter tension caused the bobbin thread stitches to be a little looser. So this is how I'm going to gather the puff, is by pulling either end, trying to keep my center marks aligned at the center of the main fabric and the foam, and then I'll have even gathers on both sides of the center marks. And then certainly use pins if you're using woven cotton fabrics, or use sewing clips. Those work really well, and those are perfect and actually better to use if you're using a non-woven or certainly a faux leather or vinyl kind of fabric. At the sewing machine, baste the layers together along the bottom edge. Let's set our exterior with the foam base aside, and we're going to prepare and attach the handle facing. With right sides together, align all edges of one main piece C, that's a handle facing, in your main fabric, and one lining piece C. Also, this will be for the handle facing. You'll sew the angled edges and outer curve together, leaving the inner curve edge unsewn. And then take your time and trim the corner, and also cut small notches into the outer curved edge, being very careful to not cut into your stitching. We're going to turn the facing right side out through the unsewn edge, and then press the seam edge if needed. Again, use an iron if you're using cotton fabrics. Otherwise, use your fingers and a seam ruler with a faux leather or heat sensitive fabric. We're going to then top stitch each short angled end with a narrow allowance. With right sides up, position the handle facing along one top edge of your main exterior puff. That's with the foam behind it, aligning the raw curved edges, and then baste from the top raw edges. You're going to repeat these steps using the remaining pieces C and the opposite curved edge of the main exterior puff. So you'll have a handle facing on both top inner curves of your main exterior. As you can see, the facing is quite a bit shorter than the top edge of the bag, and that is the way it should be. You need some extra room for sewing, so don't be alarmed. You do need that extra space between the facing short edges and the angled edge of your bag. I've got another design option for you. You can add a handmade label, installing it over the side seam just above the bottom edge of that side seam. Follow our instructions included in the pattern, or if you need a little extra guidance, you can always look up our purse hardware playlist, and you'll find the metal handmade labels tutorial on our YouTube channel. Now that I have my handmade label attached, we're going to move on to the assembly of the exterior. First, measure and mark the center, front, and back on the bottom edge of each main exterior piece. That's your puff. I'm actually turning the puff wrong side out so the foam is visible on the outside. And it's much easier to mark the foam than all those little gathers So I'm marking the foam front center and also back center along that bottom edge. And then also double check on your main fabric base that your front, back, and side center marks are still visible. So now with right sides together, match the center marks on the base with the center marks along the bottom edge and side edges of your main exterior, aligning the raw edges. And then at the machine, sew together and leave the bag wrong side out. Be sure to use lots of sewing clips or pins to hold the layers together. And I find it's easiest to sew this step with the base against the bed of the sewing machine. And then also you can certainly snip into the curves of your main piece of fabric to help relax that edge after sewing. And here's another helpful tip. This is from our testers. They found it really helpful to have the needle in the down position whenever you need to pivot or shift the fabric. So if your machine has a needle down option, you might find that very helpful. You may notice I still have my gathering threads attached. I prefer to keep them intact until after I have this whole base seam stitched. Then I know the gathers won't release accidentally. I do like to start my base seam along a long straight edge. It gives me a little extra room to get that seam started. We'll set the exterior aside for a minute and let's get into the lining. First, we're going to make and attach the slip pocket. So I've already gone ahead and added the slip pocket. We have illustrated step-by-step instructions for that in the pattern. And again, you can always watch a tutorial that Jess has done of how to assemble an interior slip pocket. That's right on our YouTube channel. It's in the bag making techniques playlist. So here I have, as you can see, the pocket attached. It's a small one, but it does come in handy for this small little bag. Once your slip pocket is attached, then you're ready for creating the interior zipper pocket. And again, I've kind of cheated and went ahead and added my zipper pocket into my second piece of lining. If you need a little extra guidance here as well, be sure to watch a detailed video tutorial Jess has done using the measurements and pocket pieces in your pattern, but then just following the steps in how to assemble an interior zipper pocket. Again, that's on our YouTube channel. Be sure your zipper in the pocket is opened completely and that bottom edge of the zipper pocket where you have the two pressed edges, that will remain unsewn so we can turn the bag right side out a little later. And let's move on to installing the snap closure. This could be optional, but it really is nice to keep your bag closed when you are using your bag. So I do recommend adding the snap closure. You'll install 1/2 of the magnetic snap centered on the right side of each lining piece D. And be sure to center that snap just below the curve, and that measurement is included in your pattern. Now with the snaps in place, we can begin lining assembly. First, you're going to mark along the straight bottom edge of both lining pieces D, that's the interior, and also the center of the sides and ends of your lining piece B, that's the base. Make sure you can see those marks. And then with right sides together, align the side and top edges of your lining pieces D interior and sew both side seams with a wider seam allowance, but beginning just in from the top edge, and do refer to your pattern for those two measurements. And then you'll trim the seam allowance to 1/4 inch. This will help reduce the bulk. And then press your seams open, either with your fingers, an iron, or seam roller. The wider seam allowance that you've made is going to help the lining fit very neatly inside your bag. Now with right sides together, match the center marks of the lining base with the center marks on the bottom and side edges of the lining interior panels. Make sure the long edge of your base is aligned to the center mark of the long edge of your lining panel. You'll sew those together again with the wider seam allowance, and after that's completed, you'll trim that seam allowance along the base and turn the lining right side out. With the lining turned right side out, we are ready to begin assembling the bag. So insert the lining into the exterior so right sides are together. You'll align the top raw edges and the side seams. Make sure the handle facings are flat and away from the seam areas. They should be tucked inside your bag. And then secure the top edge with sewing clips. And then you're going to sew around the top edge. I would recommend starting and stopping at the side seams, just to make sure you secure those very well with back stitching. Then take a few minutes to trim the excess foam from this top seam allowance. That will help when we do the final stitching on the bag. You'll angle trim the corners. Again, this will help reduce bulk. And then also clip into the curved seam allowances. That will allow them to lay flat once you've turned the bag, and be very careful not to cut into any of your stitching. All right, with everything trimmed and clipped, turn the bag right side out by pushing the exterior and lining through the bottom unsewn section of your zipper pocket. Either hand sew or top stitch the opening in the pocket closed, and then smooth the lining down into the exterior or the bag. You'll gently push out the corners and edges to shape your bag. Now, with your fingers, roll the top edge of the bag so the seam is neat and crisp along the top. And certainly you can use an iron if you're using cotton fabrics. If you're using fabrics that are heat sensitive, please just use your fingers. Now you're going to move the handle facings up out of the way, so they're going to kind of be bunched up in that little half circle along that top edge of your bag. A quick note on this top stitching. I like to start my top stitching somewhere in the handle facing area. That way my stitching is going to be covered if I don't get a nice smooth start. Top stitch the top edge with a narrow allowance, and be careful as you're stitching to not catch the handle facings, magnetic snap, or pockets in your top stitching. So this is kind of a tight area, but take your time, you're going to be fine. And then we can attach the circle handles. This is the last step. With right sides up, position one circle handle on your main fabric exterior, and then bring the handle facing through the circle handle, encasing the handle itself, and then either pin or tape, and I think tape works really well here, the handle facing edge in place. The cloud bag was designed for our wooden circle handles, so if you're using a different circle handle, it may fit inside the facing a little differently. And this is where a zipper foot is going to be helpful for you, or a very narrow foot like I'm using. You're going to top stitch along the outer edge of the handle facing, that larger curved edge, with a narrow allowance and through all the layers. So you'll be stitching through the main fabric, the foam, and the lining. And be sure to arrange the excess main fabric as gathers. Those gathers are going to look like they come right out from underneath the handle facing. And then also stitch slowly. Again, you want to be aware of where your snap is. And double check that too as you're pinning and basting tape the handle facing in place. And you'll repeat the same step, attaching the remaining circle handle to your bag front. Well, I hope you enjoy using your cloud bag. You can make this bag as fancy or as casual as you like just by the fabric that you select, as well as the handle hardware. If you have further questions, please leave a comment below and we'll do our best to answer them. We encourage you to share photos of your completed projects using hashtag SallieTomato and hashtag CloudBag. If you found this tutorial helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you always know when a new video is here. Thanks for joining me in this tutorial. Until next time, have a great making day.